Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dave Kittle Show. This is Dave Kittle, and I'm here today joined by Eric Miller. He's the Chief Advisor at Econologics. Eric, welcome on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for carving some time in your schedule. I know you guys are busy, you and your team. Give the audience and practice owners out there a little bit of information about yourself and your firm.
Yeah. So about 12 years ago, I trained as a financial advisor, which, a lot of people have experience with financial advisors, good, bad, and ugly, I guess. But I came to a point in my life where I knew I wanted to help private practice owners. My family has a history in healthcare, and I just really appreciate the kind of care that these kind of people provide. But I found that they were very financially underserved. But I also saw that when it came to giving them financial advice, particularly practice owners, that I didn't understand how their business worked. And that was the biggest investment that most of them had. So we had to do a deep dive into how does the biggest investment that an owner has, which is their private practice, how does it work? How does it operate? How can we help them improve the value? How do we help them, transfer the cash flow to benefit their household so they can, save, invest, get debt free, and all of those things. So we spend all of our time working with practice owners. Our target is their household, but we only cater to the private practice owner. And we started with physical therapists. Those were our first clients. So I have a natural affinity for working with physical therapists.
Excellent. So since I'm a physical therapist and I own a home therapy practice here in New York City, and since most of the audience are going to be my colleagues and other physical therapists across the country, maybe some other healthcare providers as well, some other practice owners and business owners, because now we're in the process of we're looking to acquire practices here in New York City. And if a practice owner is potentially looking to sell or even considering it, I'm assuming, it's never too early to try to get your ducks in a row. But if you would advise, even for your types of services, any type of professional services, how early or late should a practice owner reach out to you guys in terms of understanding their financial situation? How is their practice operating? Is it even sellable? And things along those lines of how they can really think about their future. Do they wait until they get further? Maybe they have to sell their practice first, then they reach out to a firm like you guys, or do you typically speak with practice owners on the front end very early, or maybe somewhere in the middle?
I think it's simple. The day that you decided that you wanted to be an owner, you took on 3 roles. You have the owner, executive, and your practitioner role. But you have to have the mindset that this business that I now own is a business. It's not a job, and it's an investment. So you want to make sure that you're preparing this investment to be as valuable as possible from the day that you begin owning it. So that's when the process starts of thinking with that end in mind. How am I going to transition out of this business at some point in time? And I, of course, want to make sure that when I do it, that the practice is as valuable as possible, so that I can get maximum value when I decide to sell. So it's a process that I always encourage owners, start now. Even if you're just owning your practice, or if you're mid-career, doesn't really matter. Start the process of getting your practice prepared. And there's a lot of different things that need to be looked at and evaluated, but you want to start the process immediately. To answer your other question, as far as like what are some things that an owner would have in mind, or they would want to have in place prior. Biggest thing is that you never want to sell when you feel burnt out. You heard that term before, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a concept of burnout that happens with a lot of owners. And all I can tell you is that if that's the case, I would be very hesitant to sell my practice when I'm in a condition of burnout. Because the reason that you're burnt out is the practice is taking more of your energy away than what you're putting more energy into this thing than what you're actually getting back in recognition or in compensation. And that is having an emotional drain on you. And the practice probably isn't worth as much as it could be because of that.
And a practice owner in a overwhelmed, frustrated, burned out stage of their career would probably sell for a lower dollar amount purchase price uh, because they're in that situation. They're more likely to just kind of give in as opposed to having leverage, right?
Yeah, here's the keys. I don't want it anymore. It's just too much work. It's just too much effort. So typically when I run into an owner that's in that condition, it's like, whoa, don't make a decision when you're in this kind of an emotional condition. There are some things that you can do to improve the cash flow, to improve the revenues, to get the practice so that it's a little bit more sellable. And you want to do that because who wants to go out like with a whimper? You'd rather go out on top. It's like going out like Michael Jordan. You want to go out making that last shot, go out on top.
Got it. And just to update the audience, like I said, we're acquiring practices, so we're not brokers. Are you guys interface as brokers, or you're separate as the wealth management side, or do you also with your firm offer service like brokers and brokerage services for an actual transaction to sell?
Yeah, so we're definitely not brokers, so I'm not going to help with the actual merger and acquisition part of that, but we do understand what a broker or a buyer would be looking at to be able to give someone full value for their practice. So there are value drivers that you would look at inside of a practice to say, okay, what's the condition of this? What's the condition of the personnel? What's the condition of the finances? What's the condition of the assets and the records? You know, what's the condition of all these things? So there are areas that we know to look at of what a buyer would want to see in order to provide someone, you know, a higher multiple than others.
Got it. In the pre-interview, we were talking about brokers, and we interface with a lot of different owners where some of them maybe are a little bit more business savvy and they're starting the negotiation with us on their own. Maybe they have their own personal accountant or attorney that they've had for years, but some owners will lead the negotiations with us. Other practice owners already have a broker or they find a broker. And I would love to get your thoughts on, does a practice owner need a broker? And it's always going to be depends on the person, because maybe they're more or less business savvy or experienced. If they've sold or bought other practices before, obviously they would have a leg up. But what are your thoughts? Does a practice owner, a physical therapy practice owner, need a broker these days?
Well, look, this is by and large going to be the largest financial transaction of your life for most people. So if that's the case, then you want to make sure you do it correctly. My viewpoint on it, up to probably a couple of years ago, was that maybe someone didn't need a broker, because if you had enough communication lines that you could find someone or find a buyer, or, you know, quite frankly, there's a lot of private equity group activity, and they're coming to you. I mean, they're knocking on your door, and, you know, it really wasn't there a huge need, I didn't think, for someone to spend the 4 or 5, 7% to find a broker where you can just go find buyers out there yourself. My viewpoint's changed on that. I think people actually should hire representation. They should have someone out there that is an advocate for them, that is trying to get the best deal possible. And as I said before, because it's such a large transaction in your life, you want to make sure that you have professional help to do so. So I would encourage people to hire a broker to help them.
Got it. So I was just earlier, I was on your website, Econologics Financial Advisors.com, and one of the tabs mentions exit strategy, which, you know, when we speak with practice owners, we speak to them about, you know, we mention exit strategy and succession plan, and maybe there's slight variations of those types of definitions. But in terms of how you help physical therapy practice owners with an exit strategy, is there, first of all, how do you help them with that? And is there a formal process or checklist, or is it informal and it depends, you know, owner by owner?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend owner by owner. I mean, there's different options that you can utilize to look at of how you're going to sell your business. And that's going to be different for everyone. You know, some people have an idea of how they want to transition out. And, you know, and of course, circumstances change over one's life, because your life isn't static. It changes all the time. So, but yes, we do have checklists that we provide to practice owners of the things that buyers would look at favorably. And this goes into many different areas of your business. So you can, okay, whatever this area in particular is, let's say it's Finance. That's a good one. Like, do I have all of my financials up to date and current? Are my profit and loss statements up to date and current? Are there any back tax issues that I have? Have my books been audited by a third party in the last couple of years? When you go through a transition, it's time consuming, it's taxing, there's a lot of pressure involved. And you want to make sure that you have a lot of these things done prior to that, because the due diligence process, it is exhausting to a degree, because everyone's asking for a lot of information and there's a lot at stake. So there are some things that you can do prior to that, so that the process, because you want the process to go as fast as possible. You don't want to draw this thing out very long. It starts going past 180 days, even longer than that. That just gives people the reason why they don't want to do it. So I would try to have everything ready so that you can do a transaction really, really quickly.
Got it. And it makes sense in terms of having that support, having a broker, someone on your side. What we've noticed with those, when you're talking about like obtaining, procuring your documents as a practice owner, making sure everything is like up to date, and is it handy, basically?
Yeah.
Because if we reach out and we're speaking with a practice owner, if they already have a broker, they just send us the information packet. There's already information in there, like all of the P&L, the income statement, the balance sheet, everything has already been organized already, and it's kind of consolidated in a really efficient manner for us. So then we can start, parsing through it and looking through it. Versus if we reach out to a practice owner and they don't have a broker, and we've learned to, in small waves, have to ask for information and start getting this information from them. Because if we ask for a laundry list of all of these financial documents, it can be overwhelming for them. So
Yeah.
there are pros and cons, but at least a pro for us is if some practice owner already is working with a broker, already retained a broker, then a lot of those documents are already prepared and they're updated, like you said, maybe even audited, which would be great. So just an added benefit for a practice owner.
And it's a good indicator, because you as a buyer, if you see someone that's organized like that, it probably gives you a little bit more confidence, because these people, like, wow, they really do pay attention to detail. And I know that I have more confidence in doing so. It's when it takes, 5 weeks to get a profit and loss statement that someone should be able to print out just like that. Or they provide, boxes and boxes of information. You're like, what is this? That's a bad indicator to a buyer that you have disorganization, and you can't grow on chaos. That is for sure.
Right. So how about this? If a physical therapy practice owner, let's say they have a couple of locations, they're doing 2 million gross top line revenue per year, how much of their financial future should be figured out or planned prior to putting their practice on the market, or selling their practice, or again, finding a broker?
Well, look, prior to you selling, there's really two simple questions you have to ask yourself. Am I financially ready to sell, and am I emotionally ready to sell? And financially ready means, do I have other income sources, or am I going to be dependent largely on the sale proceeds of the practice to fund my desired lifestyle, whatever that is? My contention is that you should not rely 100% on just the sale of the practice to fund whatever your lifestyle is going to be post-practice sale. So you would want to make sure that you start getting prepared right away to build other income sources outside of your business. Someone that's got a $2 million practice, it's a pretty good practice. They should be able to channel, a good percentage of their profits away each year to the household, so that they can create other income sources. So it is a missing piece for most practice owners. Most practice owners that I run across are doing the bare minimum. They're, maybe putting money inside of a 401k plan, maybe putting money in an IRA account, but they're not really building significant assets outside of their practice. And that's a big mistake, I think. So we really try to get people to utilize their practice cash flow better, so that they can, expense their profits to their household to get the household financially independent.
Got it. If you were to help a physical therapy practice owner through this whole process, what are some things that you see that make sense? I mean, maybe there's a slight change now with inflation, but if a practice owner were to exit their practice and have a great deal of money, and obviously we know this is not financial advice, and we're not
Yeah.
we're not pinning you to this, but what have you seen some of your clients do? Like, do they take some of that money and do they diversify? Do they put it in the stocks? They put it into real estate? Do they use that to, depending on their age, maybe they start a new business? Do they have it, liquid so that they can go traveling and just kind of have a comfortable retirement? Obviously, it depends on the exit size, but
Yep.
what are maybe just some asset areas or asset classes that you see your clients interested in after a potential sale?
Yeah, certainly. I think and again, this probably exposes a bigger problem, because a lot of people that have worked with, a local financial advisor who's kind of used to just managing their investment portfolio, all of a sudden, hey, here's $4, $5, $6 million that this person gets, and they utilize the same philosophy that they did before, which is largely just putting it in U.S. equities and the stock market. You have to think like more of like a family office approach, especially when you get a large influx of money. And the approach that most of those family office managers have is risk management. It is, the money's been made. Like, the money was made on the sale of the practice. Like, the rates of return aren't as important now, because I've created the wealth. The wealth has been created. Now the responsibility on both the person that sold and their advisor is to manage the risk. So that means that you are allocating money both in direct investments. When I say direct investments, maybe like alternative investments, private placement deals. You're, as an accredited investor, you would be open to some of those deals. Certainly public securities would fit the mold somewhere, but probably not as heavily weighted as what most people are in their 401ks and in their current situation. And then insurance products, annuities, cash value life insurance. I mean, these are industries that have been around hundreds of years for a reason, because they provide guaranteed income for practice owners. So in combination with that, and I really try to encourage people, if they can, to own their building, because it can be a really good asset, especially when you sell, as an income source, because the new buyer is going to need to practice somewhere. And if you own the building, then you can just get the rent as a landlord from there. And it's a pretty powerful income stream. So I don't know if I answered all that question, but that's how I would. I mean, it really is a risk management approach. It's not just, hey, let's just put all this money in an S&P 500 index fund and the beach. It really has to be a thoughtful process.
Right. And that the cost of real estate up here in New York City is pretty expensive. So we have interfaced with a few practice owners that happen to actually own the real estate, and obviously they own the practice there. So we're definitely in the mindset where, like, we're just looking to be a leaseholder and acquire practices. But some of those practice owners that we've spoken with, like, they definitely got comfortable really quick. Like, if, as long as we all like each other, if they were to sell to a physical therapy buyer, it makes their life easier. It's not like you have to convert that space into some other business or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really powerful asset, and they're very valuable. And, at some point, as you guys are acquiring more practices, you'll probably get to that point where you'll have enough cash flow where you guys can start buying the buildings as well. Kind of that Ray Kroc McDonald mentality, and get into that space. But yeah, you're right. Most buyers right now are not buying the buildings, or are they interested in the buildings? But they do sign relatively good leases. Most of them are 5-year leases, 10-year leases, renewable every 5 years, with 2% increase every single year. So they're actually pretty good investments. The buildings are pretty good investments.
What have you seen in terms of with clients selling? Do you see them typically sell if they own the real estate of their healthcare practice? Have you seen a lot where they're selling in the same transaction, they're selling the practice and the real estate? Or maybe it's a mixed bag, and sometimes they retain the real estate, like in our desire, and then sell the actual practice and the patient list and all that?
It all depends on who's buying them. So if they're like you're selling to a competitor or a corporate entity, most of them are not interested in buying the building. If you're selling to like an associate or it's kind of an internal buyout, then sometimes I've seen that where the person that's buying it would like to have the real estate. I typically advise people not to sell the real estate and the business in the same transaction. Maybe just 3 years later, work it in so that that person has the right to buy the building at some point in time. But you really want to keep it as an income source. And you would do that from an income standpoint and from a tax standpoint too.
Right. And the one reason, like you said, whether it's us or another equity backed or some other type of group that's going to look to just be a leaseholder and acquire the practice, not do the real estate. If you're listening and if you own the practice and the real estate, it's nothing against it. It's just it takes more capital to actually acquire the real estate as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there's groups now, there's private equity groups that are only going out and just buying practice buildings. So they've created these groups now just to go buy practice buildings because they see that they are very valuable investments. So that's another reason why you'd want to hang on to it if you could.
So in that case, they know that the tenants, who would be the physical therapy owner, chiropractic owner, et cetera, they know it's a very stable niche industry. It's always going to be in demand. So
yes,
I'm assuming that's why a group like that would be interested in just acquiring the real estate. I think it's maybe it would be challenging if a practice owner owned the real estate and the practice. Have you ever seen a transaction where there's two buyers and it's one transaction at the same time? I mean, typically it sounds like it would be easier to be separate.
Two buyers and one transaction at the same time.
So let's say practice owner in New York City, they own the real estate and they own the practice. We come to buy the practice. There's the other fund or firm that you just mentioned. They want to buy the real estate.
Oh,
does the seller sell both of those at the same time? And are those, I mean, two separate deals or part of the same transaction? How would that work?
It would be two separate deals, although the group buying the building would certainly want to talk with the group that's buying the practice because there needs to be a lease agreement in place there, which is another reason why you want to make sure that even if you own your building, you have a lease agreement, like you keep it separate, you have its own LLC. There's a separate lease agreement with your practice. That way you have proof of that the practice can afford the rent that you're going to be asking from the new buyer. So
got it.
It's but they're very valuable investments, and I'd encourage people to try to grab their buildings if they can. But in New York, it's probably not as easy to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's say a practice owner comes to you and says, hey, Eric, we're looking to potentially sell in the next 3 to 5 years. They're not in any rush at all.
Yeah.
Do you work with these clients? Do you advise them on practice value or even valuation and optimizing their practice so that when they are ready to sell in the next 3 to 5 years, they understand the process, they understand how their business is valued, they can actually potentially optimize and improve that between now and then. And at the same time, they'll be smarter and more prepared for how the negotiations go and what a buyer is actually looking for in their practice.
Yes. So to your point, definitely. We actually do an appraisal on most of our practice owners when they start working with us, just so they can see like what their EBITDA numbers would look like. And that's important for them because they can see how much cash flow that the practice is actually providing their household. And it's a lot more than what people actually think. So it's a good exercise to show them that and to show them like, look, you're in a range right now where, you're probably not going to get more than maybe like a 2 or 3 multiple. Whereas if you expand, if you increase, hire more PTs, you can get that multiple up to maybe a 6 or 7 multiple. So we definitely make sure that they understand the value of their business and then things that they can do to improve the value of their business. And it's not a lot of complex stuff. I think for most people, they have a certain size of a facility and they're probably only operating at 50 or 60% of its capacity. So really it's just an exercise in showing them, look, you need to get this thing up to 80 to 90% of its capacity. It's just going to not only allow you more cash flow for your household, but it's going to increase the value of the business by doing that. And just pointing out simple things like that always tends to help owners.
Yeah. One thing that I would definitely suggest, and I would love to hear your feedback on this, is if an owner is thinking about exiting and selling in the future, we're much more favorable to an owner who the practice, like maybe they're treating patients 1 day a week, or maybe not even at all. That's ideally, like, they've built all the systems, processes, they have staff, they have payroll, the front desk, everything is just completely running smoothly. Maybe not optimal capacity, that can always be improved. But we also have practice owners reach out to us, and they're intertwined in the treatment of patients, and they want to treat patients. And there's many practice owners that want to keep doing that. That's totally fine. I get it. But when we speak with practice owners and they're asking for a ballpark multiple of EBITDA, or a ballpark, purchase price, depending on their revenue and their net profit and all of the inner workings of what they have going on, we let them know that it's much more valuable. We will pay you more if you are not treating patients and you're not intertwined in actually producing or completing the service and treating patients. Do you see, or do you speak with practice owners about that specifically? Do you kind of let them know that you might take a dip in personal income between now and when you sell, but it actually be more valuable when you go to sell if you're not actually in the trenches every day?
Yeah, it's funny because the owners that I've seen that have had that consideration about, well, if I bring someone on that takes me out of patient care, that's going to lower the amount of money that I'm able to get from the practice. And the exact opposite generally happens. When you really hire people to do functions that allow you to free your time to be able to expand or go out and do more PR activities, or expand the business, hire better people, then you're going to get it back, especially when you transition. So, but that's just being more of an owner executive than trying to get stuck down in the practitioner role. And, a buyer, to your point, if you're responsible for like 20% or 25% of the production of the practice, they're just going to look at that unfavorably, because it's like, okay, well, that person has to be there now. And if your goal is to want to stay and work for another 3 or 4 years, that's fine, but you're still never going to get the maximum value for it if that's the case. So you definitely want to work yourself out of a position as a practitioner. Not only that, you're just much more valuable as an executive anyway to the organization, I think. So, but that's a tough thing to get through someone that's been trained to deliver healthcare. Like, that's what I know. Like, I'm really good at being a practitioner. Okay, that may be the case, but that's the lowest paying position in your practice. Your owner and your executive skills are much more valuable and have the ability to pay you a much higher value if you do them right. So.
Got it. Circling back to life insurance and life insurance policies, you help them with that?
Yeah, sure. As far as like products are concerned, I mean, the any investments, any insurance products that people need, we're full service. We do alternatives. We do, I can advise on anything as a registered investment advisor. But I think the approach is, look, your ideal financial scene would look like this. You would want to have a household that has multiple income streams coming in, free of all bad debt, assets that are protected from taxes, inflation, and lawsuits. Your business is in a maximum value condition, and you have time to pursue whatever life goals that you have. That's the strategy for most people. At least that's what the goal should be. And getting people into that condition is what a financial advisor should be doing. Product sales, all those things are certainly part of it, but the strategy would be, how do I get to that condition as fast as I possibly can? And that's the game for most practice owners.
If you helped a practice owner that was, let's just say, 60 years old, they never had a life insurance policy beforehand. Mm-hmm. You help them during this process, they exit. Are they behind the 8 ball because they haven't had a plan, or they haven't paid into a policy, or now that they have a lump sum of money, they could potentially start with a life insurance policy at that age? Is it ever too late to start?
I probably wouldn't do a life insurance policy for a 60-year-old. You can do another type of product called an annuity, although you really can't do that in New York because New York doesn't look at annuities very favorably. So, but that, I mean, it's not restricted. I mean, there are other options that somebody like that would have as far as like being able to have a comfortable retirement. Um, but yeah, it's going to be dependent upon the circumstances and the state that person is in, or whether or not they can use certain insurance products.
Got it. And right now, just in terms of your coverage of practice owners, are you just in the in the United States, North America, elsewhere, or is it certain states that you help practice owners?
So all over the place, we have practice owners in all 50 states. So from Hawaii to Maine, I like to say, we help practice owners in all these different states, with a lot of a big portion of our clientele are physical therapists. So like I said, that was the start that we got. We started working with physical therapists 12 years ago. So they've always been kind of a favorite of mine in working with them. And their industry is, to me, it's a great industry to be in right now. There's a real opportunity. This industry, the whole healthcare industry obviously is a good opportunity, but there's a lot of consolidation going on right now. And even with the consolidation going on right now, there are so many more independently owned practices out there than there are corporate owned. So there's such a huge opportunity to go out there and really take it. But you got to know how to run a business. I mean, that's the skill that most people didn't learn in PT school, is like, how do I do that?
Right.
So, get part of groups and, find other consultants that can help you, show you how to run the business. It's so important. It's so important.
No, I mean, it's the same thing as if someone has low back pain and they go on YouTube to try to, treat their own lower back pain, and then they get frustrated that it doesn't work right away or whatever. So same type of idea. Like, don't try to do your own accounting, get an accountant. Don't try to do your own, legal documents, get a lawyer. And then also in terms of long-term planning, exit strategy, wealth management, definitely, speak to a firm like you guys, as opposed to, talking to a neighbor or someone, and, that may have gone through a sale of their business and now they have some extra money. But definitely always makes the most sense to speak to a specialist.
Definitely build a competent team, and that team may change as you grow, so the people that you start, I mean, it's the hardest thing for people to recognize, is that the team that I have right now may not be the same team that I'm going to have, as I try to scale. And you got to look at people that are competent, that have the ability to kind of adjust to where you're going, but you have to know exactly where you're going. Do you want to have a $10 million net worth? Do you want to have a $20 million net worth? You want to have a $50 million net worth? I'm assuming that what you guys are doing, you're trying to acquire, as many practices as you possibly can, because you want to exit out for, at some point, a good amount of money, so it takes different skills to be able to do that. There are different levels to the financial game. And if you just want to have, like the traditional model of just having like $2 or $3 million in retirement accounts, you can do that, but it's, you're only one health issue, one lawsuit, one stock market crash away from having 50% of your wealth reduced. So you really need to make sure your target is much higher. I think most practice owners should have a target of at least $7 to $10 million in total assets. And I know that's like, what? But what are you doing it for? Do you really want to be able to live the life that you want to live, or do you just want to be able just to get by? So that's the question that you have to kind of ask yourself.
For sure. If private practice owners just, thinking about researching what you guys do, what else is out there, is there a certain practice owner that qualifies or would best qualify for you guys? Like, is there a certain minimum in terms of either net worth or income or practice size or years in business? Is there any type of minimum that a practice owner would just need to get to in order to reach out to you guys?
I think at minimum, doing at least $500,000 in revenue would be a start. I mean, typically we like to see people doing at least $1 million in revenue in their business, because I can make a meaningful impact on that person. I can show them how to channel money from their business to their household. But if you're doing 100,000 in revenue, 200,000 in revenue, it's kind of tough to do so. So really, someone that's in that, let's say $750,000 to $1 million revenue range, we can make a dramatic impact on their household financial condition in really less than a year, just by showing them how to reconfigure how they're paying themselves, how they're pulling profits or lack of pulling profits, and really make sure they're operating on the right targets.
Excellent. Yeah, I just had a colleague tell me a week or two ago about anything that is, spent as an expense in your business, it should be an investment. There should be some ROI to it, either an objective number or there's some subjective, like there's going to be some return that actually you're building the business, right? I'm assuming that would also include your costs and your fees, just like any other, a lawyer, an accountant. It's an investment in yourself and the practice, as opposed to some, big shock at how much something like this might cost.
For sure. Look, there's the two basic rules that I always I live by is that your business is going to try to spend everything that it makes and then some, and it will. Will try to spend everything that it makes, but it will also make what it thinks it needs to make to cover its most vital expenses. And if you want to have profits, if you want to have reserves, if you want to have money come into the household, then you have to incorporate those things in as expenses. And once you do that, it puts the correct estimate of how much revenue the business needs to bring in every single month. I can go to 10 practices probably in the New York area, and I could probably find that most of them are underestimating what their make break number actually needs to be by probably $10, $15, $20,000 or more, right? Because they're underestimating what they think they need to make. They're not including their taxes. They're not including their owner compensations. They're not including, having a couple months of business reserves inside their bit. They're not including all these things as actual needs, and therefore the practice isn't making it. So, just those things right there get someone to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm making 80,000 a month, but I need to be making 100,000 a month." Okay, well, great. So how many more patient visits do you have to do to make up that gap? It's never as hard as what you think it is, but you got to get the right number. You can't operate on the wrong number. So if you're always stressed about money, if you're always wondering why I have to borrow to pay tax or why I don't have enough in my household, you're just underestimating what your business make break needs to be. And once you get that reconfigured and get the demand on the business correct, it'll cover it. It just always does. It's kind of mystical that way.
That's awesome. I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Eric. This was awesome. Very informational. If there's anyone in the audience that's watching, that's listening, they want to reach out to you, you guys can check out econologicsfinancialadvisors.com on the web. What's a good place if someone wants to reach out to you or the firm, whether it's email address, LinkedIn, website, elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, they can just go to the website, and then we have the ability to take an online assessment. So you can go to the website. There's an online assessment that everyone take. It's about 100 questions, just yes, no, or maybe. And that will allow you to, generate like a score for your personal financial condition. Or you can just download a book. We have a book, Financial Success Guide for Physical Therapists, that they can download as well.
Excellent. Well, Eric, thank you for your time. Would love to have you back in the future. And if there's any practice owner that I speak with that is looking for wealth management and financial services, I'll definitely not hesitate to reach out to you and send them your way. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
All right. Bye now. Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE@CONCIERGE painrelief.com. Or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.